The cutting of a honey pomelo is a violent, tender process. The man at the fruit shop uses both hands to firmly hold the fruit against the wooden board. He takes a long blade and sets it against the pomelo's leathery yellow skin at a vertical angle. He pushes in, and it gives way with a soft, squeaking sound. The spongy pith is thicker than I realized, almost 2 centimeters. He pulls the knife downwards, making a long cut from the top of the globe to the base. The same again on the other side. He sets down the knife, grips the edges of the seam, and pulls. I hear that familiar sound of the fruit skin sucking away from the membrane. The sound makes me thirsty. The pieces of shell fall away to the floor. My jewel pink pomelo is bagged up and handed to me for 6 yuan. There are empty skins scattered all around the fruit shop's tiled floor, like offerings. I carry my naked pomelo home under my arm, my fragrant, sticky bundle. A sugar-sour scent follows me wherever I go. My first summer as a student in Shanghai was a summer of unpeeling. Almost all others had left campus. I had 2 months before my few friends would return. I was 22. I had always wanted to return to Shanghai, a city so deeply embedded in my memory, a city I grew to love at a time when I was becoming myself. I'd always promised my mum and myself that I would at some point seriously dedicate time to learning or relearning Mandarin. Eager to put off forging a career path with my new master's in creative writing for as long as possible, I applied for a new government scholarship to study Mandarin in China and got it. Waves of homesickness rolled over me throughout the summer. I had to come to terms with this new way of being, this new aloneness. Swimming, my usual way of reclaiming myself, wasn't an option. The only pools around were inside expensive hotels. The languid heat and high humidity made moving through the city feel like swimming. I set to work, whittling down my daily life to things I knew might keep me afloat in lieu of daily human contact. I bought a new prepaid Wi-Fi card, enrolled in an online poetry class, downloaded all 7 seasons of Gilmore Girls, and cycled across campus every day for a bowl of noodles or wontons and fresh fruit. At the fruit shop that stayed open late, the table out front was stacked with plastic boxes filled with candy pink cubes. With a box of cut papaya and a pomelo tucked in the front basket, I cycled back through the violet dusk, warm, smoggy wind in my hair. Towards the end of summer, I responded to a WeChat job ad from a Shanghainese mother looking for an English tutor for her daughter. I took 2 subway trains across the city to meet her at a McDonald's, where she bought me a raspberry-flavoured ice slushie and admired my tattoo. Her daughter was shy, though she liked telling me in careful English about her favourite manga comics. I took the job, and at their kitchen table every week, their Scottish fold cat sat wide-eyed on the table between us, purring at me. I'd stay for dinner, and both mother and daughter taught me together how to use my fingers, knuckles, teeth, and tongue to unpeel and eat tiny Shanghai freshwater crayfish, xiaolongxia, little dragon shrimp. It was a labour-intensive process of picking, peeling, and sucking sweet flesh out of each crimson shell. Hi, I'm Nina Mingya Powles, and my book, Small Bodies of Water, was published in August by Canongate Books, and it's a collection of essays about growing up mixed race and also about my deep love of swimming. So it really connects all the different bodies of water that I've felt a closeness to in my life. And it's also about language and about food. And I think what drew me to these topics was really wanting to broaden the field of nature writing, because I don't often think of myself as a nature writer, but I realize that the ocean and landscapes, both rural and urban, keep popping up in my writing, in my poetry, and also in my essays. So I wanted to explore more what water means to me and what swimming has done for me in my life and how important it is to me to be near a body of water. And I think what inspires me in my writing is really the everyday. At the moment, especially since I finished part of the book in lockdown last year, it was really challenging, but my everyday surroundings, leaving my flat, going outside, taking the time to notice things around me and make notes on my phone, colours, birds, plants, trees, those things really do inspire my writing. And also, very importantly, cooking and food memories, constant things in my writing. I think I'm always keeping notes of ingredients, making notes about recipes and things I want to cook, and this really comes through in my writing, and also is a way that I keep myself sane and a way that I keep up my own creativity, because I think cooking is really a form of making and creating just as much as almost other types of art. At the moment, I'm actually not working on any big projects because my book came out just a few months ago, and I'm still in quite a busy in-between phase, I think, and that's okay. I think recently I've tried to be much kinder to myself about not writing and not feeling inspired, and thinking of these in-between periods as just as important to the creative process and just as important to being a writer, because as much as some writers will say, they write every day without fail, but that's simply not always realistic for everyone. So I think other types of making and creating, to me, are just as critical to my life as an artist. So as I said, that sometimes means cooking. I've been learning to make my own clothes, and I've been gardening a lot. And so I have been thinking about upcoming possible projects relating to these types of making, as well as writing. So my favourite book of 2021, this was really hard, but it's this book called Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, who's an American musician, and it's about her relationship with her Korean heritage and music, and growing up in suburban Oregon, and getting to know her mother and her mother's culture through food, through cooking, and remembering childhood memories of food, and particularly learning how to make kimchi, which is actually my current project that's what I'm working on, making kimchi from scratch. So yeah, thanks.
Hip-hop is an art form that originated in the margins and can be simultaneously devastating and celebratory, an expression of pain, love, and desire, or an ode to the other, the underdog, and the underground. It is empowerment and subversion, but also full of contradictions and unresolved controversy. It's all of these things and much more. For me, though, it's the crucial association with social movements, revolutionary campaigns, and cultural awareness, as well as protest and activism, that proves that hip-hop can be a safe haven, especially for the oppressed. Hip-hop has always been something of a safe haven for me. Many would likely consider this an unusual statement to make, with a phrase like safe haven perhaps viewed as the antithesis to hip-hop. But creatively, mentally, and emotionally, it has been the place that I've landed throughout my adult life when my mind is in desperate need of a boost. My own connection to hip-hop was forged in the 90s and the early 2000s, where I grew up with a music taste largely defined by an older sister, who gravitated towards R&B and hip-hop as a teenager. I remember vividly dancing around her living room while MTV blasted out music videos by the likes of TLC, Biggie, and Aaliyah, just a few of our favourites. One of my earliest memories of my little brother also strangely revolves around the genre. Struggling to sleep as a newborn, we soon discovered that he had a natural fascination with the aforementioned music videos. So my sister taped a random selection that were on heavy rotation, including Tupac's Changes, Missy Elliott's Get Your Freak On, and Outkast's Miss Jackson, and my brother would gently be rocked to sleep against the soothing backdrop of gangster rap and alternative hip-hop. This unorthodox method would have him snoring away in less than 15 minutes, and so began the legacy of the tape. Why my fairly traditional Muslim South Asian mother encouraged this, I'll never fully understand, but I think she secretly really liked Missy Elliott. We were the type of first-generation immigrant kids that naturally rebelled against our parents' desire to assimilate into their South Asian heritage, and so we looked to music and TV instead for a different cultural fix. We brushed off Bollywood in favour of American hip-hop and shunned our parents' Asian sitcoms and soaps for The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Sister Sister. Black American culture spoke to us, and growing up in Scotland with very few brown people around, it was our only immediate bridge to other people of colour. Sure, it wasn't our culture, and it wasn't about our experiences, but there was something in hip-hop in particular that made me feel like it was okay to be the only brown person in the room. My own teens were dominated by an all-consuming love for Nirvana and everything grunge, but in the background, hip-hop was always there. When I was around 15, I started writing, mostly silly poems and rambling essays about music, but I was also obsessed with pulling apart lyrics, trying to really understand what was being said and why. The golden age of hip-hop was where I found most comfort at this point. The stylistic innovations, eclectic cadences, and fast rhymes of the era drawing me in like no other form. This deep-seated interest never left me, only intensifying as I learned more about the originators and pioneers of the genre, as well as what was happening in the present in contemporary hip-hop. It all reached a climax at university. I took my interest a step further and wrote my undergraduate dissertation on the form. Studying English literature, hip-hop came up in exactly one slide in one lecture on vernacular poetry, but that was all the permission I needed. Sadly, my supervisor didn't see it that way. He encouraged me to switch topics, commenting, "I don't understand the point of hip-hop. I don't mind Jay-Z too much, though." There were no people of colour in the department's teaching staff, and I felt as if I wasn't being taken seriously with my lofty hip-hop academia. Being determined, and desperate to stick it to the old white man who dismissed me, I went for it anyway. The topic? Defiance in hip-hop. I've never felt as passionate about researching and writing something as I did that dissertation, and it sparked a lifelong dream to write about music professionally and academically. Which leads me quite nicely to the title of this chapter and introduction, Bad Bitch Alert. In 2015, I was commissioned to write my first article for the List magazine. The article, Bad Bitch Alert, was my take on how female MCs, including Lizzo, LaKelly47, were challenging hip-hop's male reign. Women have occupied a vital space in hip-hop from its very beginnings in the Bronx in the 70s, but men have always dominated in one way or another, with gendered hierarchies becoming ingrained in the genre itself. I was lucky in that I was exposed to everyone from Salt and Pepper and Left Eye to Queen Latifah and Missy Elliott early on, thanks to my older sister. Women were very much a big part of everything I knew about hip hop, and in many ways, the reason I started falling for hip hop in the first place. Seeing not only people of colour, but women of colour on screen, powerful, confident, completely in control, contributed to what I believed was possible for us growing up. It contributed to my idea of this safe haven. Despite being the geographical focus of Flip the Script, the UK hasn't made a significant appearance yet, and there's a reason for that. Since my childhood was so heavily governed by American pop culture, I didn't listen to or really know what was happening in the UK scene. It wasn't until I reached my late teens that I started to properly appreciate the sheer strength and vivacity of UK hip hop in its various iterations. People like Roots Manuva, Kaleshnikov, and Miss Dynamite were just some of the artists rightfully taking up space in my music collection and playlists, but it took some time. When I was finally able to go back and delve a bit deeper into how the country adopted this Black American art form, I realised that it wasn't just a case of adoption, it was the creation and restyling of genre that spoke to an audience with a very specific social and political history. What always strikes me is how few women are included in any historical analysis of the genre or best of all time lists in the UK when, just like in the US, women have been in attendance since day one. It's not about women not existing, it's about visibility and often erasure. If hip-hop is a vital cultural force and haven for the oppressed, how are the voices of many core figures so easily forgotten? As I've continued towards my goals of hip-hop scholarship, I've increasingly felt drawn to celebrating these voices, and the genre keeps giving me all the more reason to. The unbelievable level of skill and finesse we're currently seeing bubbling up in UK hip-hop, especially from women, only accelerated in a year marked by lockdowns, cancellations and postponements. The winners of both the Scottish Album of the Year award and the Welsh Music Prize in 2020 were female rappers, Nova and Dea respectively. It indicated a seismic shift in both the music industry's mentality towards women, but with emphasis on women of colour, and the general public's approach to hip-hop as a respected and valued art form. More hinted at how UK hip-hop cannot and should not be viewed exclusively through the lens of its capital city. Hip-hop can be that bridge for many people to other cultures, as it was for me growing up in Scotland. Within these regional scenes, women are not only thriving, but importantly dominating and leading the charge. When I wrote that Bad Bitch Alert article, Nicki Minaj had already been nominated for 7 Grammy Awards. Soon Cardi B would release her first full-length project and Megan Thee Stallion was close behind with her debut single. It was a good time commercially for women in hip-hop, and this snowballed since. This is where I feel we are with hip-hop in the UK, at the cusp of something incredible. It's time to embrace the changing of the guard. Flip the Script is a homage to the women who are innovating and revitalising the genre, the future MCs and leaders of hip-hop, and those that were there at the very beginning. The list of names that deserve credit is limitless, but this is a celebration of what we have to look forward to, a snapshot of that musical magic. This is me welcoming you to my safe haven. May it become yours too. My book is called Flip the Script, How Women Came to Rule Hip-Hop. And this book is specifically about women in UK hip-hop. And in a nutshell, the reason I decided to focus on the UK was that, first of all, I personally feel that we're in a really great place in UK hip-hop right now. But I believe with all my heart that women are a huge reason for that. And secondly, there really isn't a huge amount out there about women that have pioneered and changed the game for UK rappers today. So this book isn't a history or a deep analysis, it's basically a love letter to the genre, telling the stories of some of the really important women of UK hip-hop in their own words. It's my way of celebrating where we are right now, but also acknowledging the women that came first and the work that is still needed. Hip-hop is something that I'm really passionate about, and not just as a genre of music, but as a movement, as an important part of culture. It's something that I love to write about and to analyse and delve into. I've written quite a bit about American hip-hop and the roots of the genre, but I wanted to shine a light on women in the UK that I felt were really changing the game. Hip-hop started in the Bronx, but it's morphed and it's travelled the world, and I'm so interested in where we are at the moment in the UK. So this book is an ode to the women who I believe are leading the charge in hip-hop in the UK in particular, and in all parts of the UK. Hip-hop it's important to me, and I want to share that with everyone, and I hope that the people reading can learn something new or even grow their own appreciation of the genre. I'm really passionate about telling stories that centre around marginalised experience, be that shining a spotlight on people doing incredible things with their own creativity or groups innovating and changing the landscape for the better. Music, of course, really inspires me, and I have a deep respect and appreciation for musicians, rappers, DJs, etc., who have managed to keep writing, recording, and releasing despite all the trials that we've had over the past few years. Music has been, and always really will be, a huge comfort to me, especially in difficult times. I've been a freelance writer and editor for just over a year now, and I'm really enjoying it, and I love that I get to do so many different things that I never thought I would get to do. So I always have various projects on the go, but I'm really pleased that I get to write about music regularly for places like Goldflake Pain, Clash, and the 45. I'm hoping to do a lot more of that next year, fingers crossed. This is a tough one because I've read loads of amazing books so far this year, but one that really has stood out to me is Jenny Fagan's Luckenbooth. It's just such an interesting and beautifully written story. It's set in Edinburgh, but a dark Edinburgh in various time periods. And I love when you're reading something and you can picture exactly where a scene is taking place. But the thing about Luckenbooth is Jenny draws you in a way that Edinburgh becomes like an entirely different character and one that you're not totally familiar with. But yeah, I just really love it.
Hi there. I'm Peter Sawkins. I'm an accounting and finance student at university, and in 2020 I was the winner of the Great British Bake Off. And now I have a book. It's called Peter Bakes. It's a recipe book, and for Book Week Scotland, I was asked to do a reading from the book, but this book is full of recipes, and we thought it might be a little bit dry for me to read out to you ingredients: 225 grams self-raising flour, 1 tablespoon ground ginger, so on, so on. It doesn't read all that well for a reading. So instead, we thought we're just going to talk you through a couple of the recipes in the book and give you a bit of an idea of what the book's all about instead. So yeah, this is my book. It's my baking book, Peter Bakes. It's full of over 100 recipes, all sweet baking recipes. And it's just really a celebration of everything that I love to bake and how I love to bake. I'll try and flick through some of the photos here so you can see what's in it. It's set out into different chapters celebrating different styles of baking, types of baking that I love to engage in. There's even a Christmas chapter at the end. And also, every single recipe in the book has a gluten-free amendment available because, this book is all about what I love to bake and how I love to bake. And gluten-free baking is very important for me. My brother is gluten intolerant, so when I was younger, baking in the house, I had to make things gluten-free so that the biggest eater in the house could enjoy the bakes that I was making. After all, I think baking is all about baking for the people that you love. So I needed to make sure it was inclusive for him. And that's reflected in this book. I had an absolutely incredible time writing it and putting it together. I got to just bake whatever I wanted, and I love the recipes that we came up with. So actually, for this wee piece, I've made 2 of the recipes from the book, and we're just gonna have a quick chat through what it's all about and the different recipes. So the first one I'll show you in the book is a lemon, clementine and almond cake. Clementines are not really in the shops right now, so I just used some satsumas instead. And here is that cake. Here is the physical form of that cake. There we go. Wonderful. Yeah, in every single recipe in the book, I have a little introduction to the recipe. Some of the introductions are connected to kind of my nostalgia with the recipe, a bit of a story about, who made this style of cake or bake for me first. But some of them are more technical and sort of talk about how you can store the cake, or if anything goes wrong, how you can amend that next time. So I'll read through the introduction to this lemon, clementine and almond cake first, and then I'll just give my thoughts on it a little bit. Using whole clementines and lemons in this cake batter brightens the flavour. There's a slight bitterness to the resulting taste, which I like, but you can omit the lemon in the batter and replace it with another clementine if you're not a fan. The resulting cake is soft and moist, and it keeps very well because of the ground almonds and oil. Covered and left at room temperature, it'll stay moist for a good 5 days. A bit more of a technical one, not a very emotional piece here. But my connection to this recipe and why I wanted to put it into the book, I made something very similar to this for the first time in around Easter of my first year of university. My auntie was up for Easter. I went home for Sunday lunch on Easter Sunday with my folks. Mum made lamb, and I'm the baker, so I need to bring a cake. I need to bring something to the table. And I made a cake very similar to this. It's an absolutely gorgeous cake, I think. Of course, I'm biased towards my recipes. I only put in recipes that I love into this book. But it uses whole lemons and whole oranges that you boil down for 15-20 minutes. And then you blitz them into a puree. And that puree, with the rind and everything, the zest, the rind, everything of the fruit goes into the cake batter, along with whipped eggs and sugar, some ground almonds, a bit of olive oil as well. And it gives this wonderful round flavour of orange and lemon that you don't get from just using the zest or just using the juice. It's a really full flavour that gets into the sponge. And I think this cake is also a good example of the kind of style of food that I like to make. The design is simply from the oranges and lemons that are sliced. They go into the bottom of the tin, you pour the cake batter on top, and then you turn it out to reveal kind of this beautiful design of oranges and lemons on top. I don't consider myself the most artistic and creative person, but I love the beauty of natural fruits, nuts, all these ingredients, which just look stunning on their own. It's kind of like a cheat code to make something look great, and I love using that in my bakes. Another good example of that would be, if I can find it quickly, this chocolate and fig fraisier cake in the book. It has, these figs standing to attention around the side of the cake, which just look immaculate and beautiful. But I didn't grow the figs, I didn't make them. They're just stunning on their own. So I think this lemon cake is another good representation of my style of baking. I love to use those fresh ingredients to give the design to the bake. The second thing that I made for this little piece is this sticky iced ginger cake. You can see it finished in the book here, but then I did just make it this morning. It's for an event tomorrow night, and it's just in the tin still, very informal. But here it is, the lovely sticky ginger cake recipe. This one is a bit sunk in the middle. I baked it for the first time in my home oven. I baked it in a different oven when I was testing the recipes, and I got the timings a little bit wrong. That stuff happens in baking. So I took it out a little bit too early. It sunk down a little bit before I managed to bake it off again. But that sort of thing happens in baking, and it'll still taste amazing. It'll still taste great. We have these small issues. And I hope that in the book, I also encourage people to not get discouraged when the little things go wrong. You can always make it better next time. And, ultimately, it's fat, sugar, flour, yummy stuff that people are going to love. If it looks awful, cover it in custard. It's all going to be good. Anyway, I'll read to you the introduction to the sticky iced ginger cake. I feel this is not always a particularly popular cake, but a good sticky iced ginger cake is one of my favourites. My nostalgic association with ginger cake is quite bizarrely connected to a badminton centre in Glasgow. After being knocked out from a badminton competition, I would get a slice of this home-baked cake as a treat for the journey back to Edinburgh. It's the most unlikely place, but I still consider that 50p square of ginger cake the best you can get. I've tried to get as close as possible to those standards in this recipe. So, as I said, some of the bakes in this book are really connected to my childhood, my memories of baking. There's lots of influence from my mum, a bit from my gran, and some from school as well. And this cake, yes, as I say in the introduction, it came from a love of a ginger cake that I would get at the Coburn Centre, a badminton centre in Glasgow. If I got knocked out of a competition, I would get this, or if I did well in the competition as well, although I would always get knocked out at some point, won very, very few competitions. I would get this sticky ginger cake for the trip home. And it's another side of baking that I love. I love baking for lots of different reasons. This cake represents feeding people and, giving them joy from something that's really simple and comforting. Because the ginger cake that I would get from this badminton centre, it was clearly homemade. It was wrapped in a wee cellophane packet. The icing kind of dripped down the side of it a bit. It got stuck to the cellophane, it got stuck to the plastic. The cake itself was so moist and just unctuous that it also got stuck to the thing. It was messy, you got your hands sticky when you went into it. but it just brought me pure joy because it was so unbelievably delicious, and there was nothing scary about it. It's so simple. You can understand it, and you understand the sort of love and passion that's gone into the bake, and it feels like someone made it just for you. And that's something really quite special, and I think that's a huge reason as to why I feel connected to this recipe, and why I have really, really fond memories of that cake back sort of years ago when I was playing badminton as a junior. So that's a little bit about a couple of recipes from the book. They follow on in similar styles. Some are really from me and just things that I've baked in the past for people that I love, and some are things that are based on people that I love baking for me, and me taking those on and sharing them in this book. I've said a couple of things already. One of the key ones is it's my creative outlet. I never thought of myself as artistic when I was younger, but actually in baking I see the beauty of the fruits like I was talking about. I see this sort of playground where I can mix and match different techniques and ideas, create sort of things that are visually striking or entertaining to the mouth, and that's something that's really special for me, to have this creative outlet. I think we all need something to be creative in, and for me, food and baking is where I can really explore my creativity. And also another really exciting and fun thing about baking is that you start from these very simple building blocks and basic ingredients, and you create something out of it that is just so completely different to what you put in. A simple cake is butter, sugar, flour, and eggs, all raw ingredients that you mix together in a certain way, and then you get out this beautifully golden, light, soft sponge that everyone absolutely loves and adores. And it came from what feels like virtually nothing. And that's really special, and that excites me even to this day. I've baked for, the vast majority of my life, and I've really baked kind of seriously for the last 10 years of my life. And I still get so excited to just turn out scones or a cake or a biscuit, because it's just this amazing change from the raw ingredients that you have to this finished product that is amazing, you can share with people that you love. I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't actually know when this was published, but I got this book in 2021, so I'm gonna run with it. It's Sweet by Jutta Mottolengi and Helen Go. Of course I've picked a baking book, of course. The thing that I love about, we all know Ottolenghi's food, I think, is that they have this use of spice and, interesting ingredients that I don't particularly have great knowledge of using, and they add that into these sweet bakes. And for me, that's really useful to learn about it and be inspired and excited by these new flavor combinations that I don't automatically go to because of my background with baking and food. So it's always good to challenge yourself on it. And also, I think that they have an incredible ability to make these bakes and make these dishes that are really fun and exciting, but still have this sort of restrained component to it, which I think is important. They don't go over the top for no reason. Everything has interest and excitement to it, but it still has the quality and characteristics of something that's, simple and beautiful and really well considered. So I think they hit that balance really, really well. It's a big book. It's dense with information and recipes and ideas and stories. And to be honest, I'm not a third of the way through, but it's a really lovely book to have. So I enjoy it a lot. One thing that's quite interesting, when writing my own book, I didn't read as many other books as I have, and that's something that I really need to consider and make sure that I keep doing, because it's the thing that has made me given me knowledge about baking, is from reading from other people and watching other people. And it's something that when you're busy off creating your own thing, I need to not forget that I need to keep on learning from others at the same time. And so I'll keep on reading as much as I possibly can. And so thank you ever so much for listening to me blab on about my book and about the recipes in it. I'm very excited to have a book of my own, and it was amazing to work with the photographer Susie Lowe and the publishers Black and White. And I hope that if you pick up a copy, you enjoy reading the little stories in it, get inspired by some of the bakes, and get cracking in the kitchen. Thank you so much.
The cities we live in today cannot see their edges. Citizens in the centre, the suburbs, and the outskirts are out of sight to one another. When a city grows larger, busier, ever stranger over time, we accept it as a sign both of its prosperity and its potential. London is illimitable, said the writer Ford Madox Ford, and he meant it as a compliment. The 15-minute city is a different kind of place. Instead of endless horizons, it presents compact neighbourhoods as the theatre for urban life. In these neighbourhoods, a quarter of an hour is the optimal time it would take to arrive from our doorsteps at essential stops for education, healthcare, work, shopping and culture, travelling by bicycle or on foot. Mindful of the environment, 15-minute city residents would seldom use the car to run short errands or commute to work. Instead, pathways for walking and cycling would be drawn and connected through the city. A new age of local living would supposedly start to dawn, aided by more flexible thinking about what goes where on our streets. The patterns of daily life would sketch themselves into smaller areas, and in the process, valuable hours of personal liberty would be clawed back from the working week. This is the vision, in its simplest form, of the urbanists, town planners and city leaders who are invested in bringing the theoretical 15-minute city to life. From Melbourne to Paris and Vancouver to Shanghai, there has been great enthusiasm about the possibility of this smaller radius of living and working as a means to make the city a healthier, greener, and perhaps more equitable place in which to dwell. It matters all the more acutely today, since the COVID-19 pandemic has created a palpable sense of before and after in almost every arena of our lives. What comes next for our cities? The uneven experiences of the coronavirus period seem to demand that it be something different. Though it is a subject in vogue, the 15-minute city is not the newest idea on the block. Analogous concepts have been devised before, across the centuries, to carve out pleasant pockets of a city that can function well inside a larger body. Georgian and Victorian London had its garden squares to create little lungs of rus in urbe amid the burgeoning industrial city, where plane, almond and sycamore trees were planted for their ability to inhale the smog. America in the 1920s proposed the neighbourhood unit, a regimented piece of urbanism that organised precise densities of people as the building blocks for cities. Contemporary Barcelona, meanwhile, has the car-limited superblock, in which traffic within a large designated block is restricted to promote active travel on foot or by bike. All of these ideas are part of the 15-minute city dialogue. It is not a rigid, inflexible formula. The 15-minute city is also a work in progress. Many cities are starting with pilot schemes, and this will inevitably lead to refinements and iterations, perhaps an eventual discardment of the idea when an evidence base is available for analysis, or even when another crisis arrives to reframe our priorities all over again. This book explores the hour of the 15-minute city in its broadest terms, to ask why its message is so resonant now, and to try and understand how it could truly make our urban lives better. As this book goes to press, thousands of politicians, activists, Indigenous leaders and climate scientists are descending on Glasgow, Scotland for the UN Climate Change Conference. And the lockdown periods of 2020 and 2021 stand at the edge of the COP26 conference, like trees casting strange shadows. COVID-19 restrictions on general social movement unwittingly mirrored many elements of 15-minute city living, such as limited travel, neighbourhood self-sufficiency, and the ability to work from home. Yet it also underlined how demanding an enclosed environment can be without the outrun of a park or a garden or the luxury of internal space, or the contrast of a train carriage or office building filled with other people's problems and ideas as well as your own. These contradictions, of which everyone had their own dose during lockdown, sparked my curiosity and prompted me to write an FT Weekend article on the subject, which set me on the path of writing this book. I am not writing as an urbanist or an academic, but as a city dweller who, like you, stands at the foot of a critical decade for the environment. These questions matter to us all, but the answers, like our cities, do not have firm edges. Welcome, then, to the 15-minute city. So my book, The 15-Minute City, is about this concept which is very hot amongst urban planning folk and is being seen as a potential model to really turn around some of the problems that are digging into our prospects for urban regeneration, but also for the environment. In its very simplest form, it says that where normally you would travel an hour, maybe 2 hours a day to commute to work, why should that happen, particularly if it means that you're going to step into a car when one can work from home and then whilst one is working from home, one can be out in the neighbourhood and have all of the amenities that are needed for daily life fulfilled in a more comprehensive but also more sort of thoughtful way than is currently the case, so that you can have a more coordinated doubling up of resources. So a school can be a training ground for other industries at a weekend, or it can be an art gallery, or an art gallery can be on the street. This is really something that was very much put forward in Paris back at the 2015 COP conference as part of the Mayor Anne Hidalgo's team. Professor Carlos Moreno at the Sorbonne, who's a professor of innovation, came up with this idea of saying, well, we have this kind of chrono-urbanism in which time is apportioned to the commute. Why can't we take it back and do something different with it? But at the same time, reclaim some of the damage really that's being wrought through some of the routines of city life that we just have taken for granted. And coronavirus is very much seen as a catalyst for thinking about this problem differently, because it mirrored some of the ideas that are in the 15-minute city model. I came to it sort of as a skeptic, really, because I think the lockdown period, as it was for so many people, I found difficult in it, the sort of literal shrinking of the horizon. And this is something that the critics of the 15-minute city idea have been quick to point out, that actually where economic instability is already an issue within a certain postcode, trying to sort of embed the idea that people shouldn't leave to further their prospects, perhaps, is creating a kind of social ghetto where that's absolutely contrary to the fundamental idea of what cities do best, which is change people's fortunes. And I was interested in exploring that side of this subject in the book. This is a kind of new type of writing for me, because I have come to writing this book from a long career in journalism, and so I think what inspired me here was sort of actually they're having the freedom really to explore something at much greater length. And I did find that quite liberating, to be able to also take time, sort of not to have this, you know, a 24-hour or week or 2-week deadline, but to actually be able to have some moments of proper reflection, and being able to leave bits of writing and come back to it. And I found that very refreshing. I suppose some of the obvious points of reference for this book are some of the great works that really sparked different thinking in the past, such as Jane Jacobs in the 1960s in America, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. That's a really important book in relation to this topic, because Jacobs' fundamental argument is that cities are spontaneous places and they work best through their own spontaneity. They have an ability to correct their own problems, to heal themselves, and that as long as there are enough people, as long as there's enough vitality and sort of eyes on the street, then neighbourhoods will sort of almost take care of themselves. And she was against this sort of more interventionist culture. However, I think that given where we are in the environment, I think that it's difficult to say that we're able just to let cities run their course in that way anymore. There have been lots of great books this year, but I think the one I enjoyed the most is an old book, and it's called War and Turpentine by Stephen Hurtens. This blew me away for the quality of the prose. It's actually a translation, so it's quite hard to know what the original text would read like, but it is a sort of painterly prose, and this is a reflection of the main character, who is the grandfather of the narrator, and he's his grandfather is a painter whose observation of the world is ruptured by the arrival of war, and then this sort of ability for people to remember each other without the colours of the war being part of it is sort of then fed into the way that it's not quite a novel, it's not quite a memoir. It's a very careful, but somehow it manages to be quite a sort of thoughtful book and humorous book, above all of the very sort of precise horror that's in it at the same time. So that was my discovery of 2021.
Although we hardly see the sun, each day now is almost imperceptibly longer than the one before. Yesterday, in the periphery of my vision, I glimpsed a hare through the window in the garden. But when I looked up, it had gone. If I wasn't mistaken, it was my first sighting this year. Spring will soon be with us again. The last time we returned to Orkney, it was dark when we drove off the ferry. Only scattered lights were visible as we came over the hill from Stromness, but then, as we rounded the loch, a greenish band of light appeared across the northern sky. I didn't take much note of it, having just come from South Yorkshire, where the sky is always so polluted with light from the cities. However, as I was carrying in bags from the car, John called to me, "Come outside quick and see the sky." At that moment, Mary from the farm pulled up beside us in the car. We hugged. "Can you see the mirror dancers?" she asked, pointing to the north. That's what they call the Aurora Borealis in the Northern Isles. And here they were in all their shimmering glory, veils of green and yellow light, moving and shifting as the gowns of ethereal performers swept around the sky. Despite many visits to the north, I had never managed to see the aurora. When camping in Iceland many years ago, one member of our group decided to sleep outside his tent, probably to show us all how tough were part-time soldiers in the Swiss army. Next morning, he casually informed everyone that he'd seen the northern lights whilst lying awake staring at the cold night sky. "I didn't want to wake any of you," he said. The rest of us hadn't been sure whether to believe him or not. More recently, on a journey to Arkhangelsk in northern Russia in the darkness of midwinter when the Dvina was frozen solid from bank to bank. I watched the northern sky every night, hoping to see them, but the dancers never appeared, even though that city is a good deal further north than Orkney. The Norwegians travelling with us laughed at me and boasted, "You should come to Tromsø, we see them all the time." Not long ago, Mary told me she'd been out to the barn the night before, seeing to the cows, and had looked up to see them shimmering in the sky. "We have them here sometimes," she said. "You have to be outside at the right time." "When it happens again, call me please, whatever time it is," I begged. However, that night in March, we had been in the right place at the right time. We stood gazing towards the horizon until our faces were numb in the cold night air and the celestial show had all but finished. "Perhaps it's a good omen," John said and pulled me close. I don't believe in magic, but I do believe in magical moments. Those occasions when something special happens, even mystical things. When we marvel at natural phenomena like an extraordinary sunrise, the golden light of the gloaming or the aurora, which truly is out of this world. At other times, the stimulus for that sense of wonder isn't obvious, but you don't have to be religious to acknowledge the spiritual element of our existence and to recognise how humanity can transcend the certainties of life. Sometimes interactions between human beings possess a singular power. When for the first time in your life you connect with another person and find someone who seems to understand you. When, as an adult, you realise something you never felt in childhood, that there is someone who really does love you, regardless of the baggage you carry from the past. When you experience forgiveness from another for something you still can't forgive yourself for. When you allow yourself to believe there is another way to live your life and it isn't all predestined. These times hold the essence of emotional healing and are magical too. "You really are very well at the moment," John says. "I don't think I've seen you so consistently well in years." "I am," I smile and say, "but I'm not sure why." That isn't entirely true. Something is happening. I'm rebuilding my life and beginning to find meaning in existence again. The sun is streaming into the kitchen window, raising our spirits, but the forecast says it will not last. People often say about island weather that if you don't like the current conditions, you only have to wait half an hour, but clouds are gathering and the needle of the old brass barometer in the window of the diving shop in Stromness was dropping when I saw it earlier this morning. There is a storm on its way. My book is about recovering from depression, which is something I've suffered from on and off really most of my life. It's about looking for different ways to recover, but it's also about trying to find out what really matters to you, which I think is one of the really important things about recovery. What do you want to do with your life? What did you used to want to do with your life before everything else got in the way? And it's also about place and about how place can be just as important to us as people. And that's really what I discovered when I came to live in Orkney, that this place helped me to feel much more grounded in myself and together. My writing is memoir, and I think I've discovered that I write to try and help me make sense of things. My writing is a way of making sense of my life and about things that are important to me. What drew me to the topic was that I found myself living here, having come here, and I was trying to recover, but I was also trying to settle into a place which was incredibly beautiful, whilst at the same time remembering lots of things that had happened to me during my life. I've travelled a great deal, and what was I always looking for and what was I searching for? And I think the other thing that drew me to that topic is that are the stories of the people that I've met both as a doctor but also as a traveller, and those stories have always fascinated me. So it was very much a way of trying to make sense of where I was as a woman in her early 60s, trying to make sense of life. I think one of the things that really inspires my writing are the people that I've met throughout my career. I think I became a psychiatrist working in mental health because I really find people fascinating. I've always enjoyed and found people's stories both very inspiring but also fascinating. And I guess I've probably collected people's stories in my head over the years, and that's been very important for my writing. But I've also collected places as well. And what I've really learned is that my writing is a way of helping to make sense of the world. I write about things that matter to me, things that I'm really passionate about and think are really, really important, that I'm trying to understand. And so my non-fiction writing is always, I think, bound up with that sense of where I am and where I'm going and what I'm thinking and worried about. I've been working on a book about women's mental health, which I think is something that I've always really wanted to write. When I was working as a doctor, the majority of my patients were always women, and I've always been very interested in trying to understand why women experience so many problems with their mental health. And so that's what I've been working on now for some time. I've been trying to get it into the right shape and into a form that is both serious but also that isn't like a textbook, that's engaging, that people can really enjoy reading and learn something from. I do read much more non-fiction than fiction these days. That's been the case for a long time, and I guess that is because that does inform my own writing. I really enjoyed reading Helen Lewis's book, which I've got here, Difficult Women, A History of Feminism in 11 Fights. I love the title of the book because I think I'm probably quite a difficult woman myself. I think quite a few people would agree with that. And I really love the way that she's taken something that's really serious, which is history, and she's managed to make it really accessible by writing about themes and writing about the characters involved and their stories and their lives, and how so many of them have ended up falling out with each other, which I can fully understand. As I say, being a woman who has had some of those difficulties in my own life.